The morning sun slipped through my bedroom curtains as I heard the familiar sound of the mail slot clicking. Normally I wouldn't rush to check it, bills and flyers were hardly exciting, but today was different. Today was my 57th birthday. I wrapped my robe around me and made my way down the narrow hallway of what used to be my home. 3 years ago, my daughter Hannah, her husband Tom, and my precious grandson Ethan had moved in with me after Tom lost his job. What started as a temporary arrangement slowly became permanent, and somehow I'd been relegated to the small back bedroom while they occupied the rest of the house I'd spent my entire adult life paying for. As I approached the front door, I noticed a cream-colored envelope lying on the welcome mat. No stamp. Hand-delivered. My name, Mom, was written in Hannah's familiar handwriting. My heart lifted. Perhaps they'd remembered my birthday after all. Last year, it had passed without acknowledgement. Hannah too busy with Ethan's school activities and Tom preoccupied with his new business venture. Back in my room, the only space that still felt like mine, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a card with a generic flower pattern. No happy birthday. Just a note that made my stomach drop and my hands begin to tremble. Mom, Tom and I have been talking. We don't have room to care for you anymore. The house is getting too small for all of us, especially with Ethan growing up. We found a nice retirement community that would be perfect for you. We'll talk about the details soon. Hannah. I read it again, certain I'd misunderstood. But the words remained unchanged, clinical and cold. My own daughter was pushing me out of my home. A home that was still in my name, with a mortgage I still paid every month. I sat on the edge of my bed, the card dangling from my fingers. The walls of my small room seemed to close in. From down the hall I could hear Hannah's laugh as she talked on the phone, Tom's heavy footsteps as he moved about the kitchen. They sounded so normal, so casual, as if they hadn't just delivered a blow that shattered my world. What hurt most wasn't just the request itself, but the way it was delivered. In a card on my birthday, without the courtesy of a face-to-face conversation. As if my feelings, my opinion, my very presence in this family were an afterthought. I wiped away a tear that had escaped down my cheek. After Raymond died 5 years ago, I'd thrown myself into being there for Hannah and Ethan. I'd watched my grandson 3 days a week so they could save on childcare. I'd given up my craft room so they could have a proper family room. I'd squeezed myself into this back bedroom that used to be our home office, letting them take the master bedroom, because they needed the space. And now this. My eyes drifted to the filing cabinet in the corner of my room. Inside was the folder containing all the documents related to the house, the deed, the mortgage statements, the insurance papers. All in my name. Raymond and I had paid off most of the mortgage before he passed, and I'd continued the payments after, determined to leave something for Hannah one day. They didn't know. Somehow, in the gradual shift of power in this household, they'd forgotten, or chosen to ignore, who actually owned these walls. I felt something hardening inside me. A resolve forming where moments ago there had been only shock and hurt. This was still my house. My home. And no one, not even my own daughter, had the right to push me out of it. A knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. I quickly tucked the card under my pillow. Mom! Hannah's voice called. Are you awake? Tom made coffee. I took a deep breath, forcing steadiness into my voice. I'll be right out. I looked at myself in the small mirror hanging on my wall. My eyes were red, but there was something else there too. A determination I hadn't seen in years. Happy birthday to me, I whispered to my reflection. Then I straightened my shoulders and headed to the kitchen, the knowledge of what I now had to do weighing heavy but clear in my mind. They wanted me gone from my own home, not knowing that every brick, every floorboard, and every shingle still belonged to me. It was time they remembered that. I didn't confront Hannah that morning. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping the coffee Tom had made, watching my family move around me as if nothing had changed. Hannah was rushing to get Ethan ready for school, reminding him about his lunchbox and homework folder. Tom was glued to his phone, probably sending emails about his struggling business venture. Mom, can you pick up Ethan from soccer practice today? Hannah asked, not even looking up from packing Ethan's lunch. I have a meeting that might run late. Of course, I said automatically, the same answer I'd given for years whenever they needed me. Thanks, she replied, distracted. Then as an afterthought, oh, by the way, happy birthday. No card. No present. Just a hasty acknowledgement squeezed between requests. Thank you, I murmured, my fingers tightening around my coffee mug. After they left, the house fell silent. I walked through each room slowly, seeing it through new eyes. The living room where Raymond and I had spent countless evenings watching old movies. The kitchen where I'd taught Hannah to bake her first cake. The garden where Raymond had built me a bench for our 25th anniversary. Every corner held memories of the life we'd built, the sacrifices we'd made. I'd been 24 when Raymond and I scraped together enough for a down payment. We'd chosen this house because it had good schools nearby, thinking of the family we wanted to create. Money was always tight. Raymond worked 2 jobs for years, and when Hannah came along, I took night shifts at the hospital to supplement our income. We went without vacations, new clothes, or fancy dinners to make the mortgage payments. When Raymond got sick, we drained our small savings to cover what insurance wouldn't. After he died, I picked up extra shifts to keep the house, to preserve the one thing I could still control in a world that had taken my husband too soon. I'd worked myself to exhaustion for this house, for Hannah's future, for the security it represented. In my bedroom, I pulled out the filing cabinet drawer and spread the documents across my bed. The deed with my name clearly stated. The mortgage statement showing the balance. Only $40,000 left out of the original $180,000. Insurance papers. Property tax records. All in my name. Then I found the folder labeled Hannah, that Raymond had insisted we keep updated. Inside were records of everything we'd done for our daughter. The college tuition we'd paid by taking out a second mortgage. The down payment we'd helped with for her first car. The loan we'd given her and Tom for their wedding, which they'd never repaid despite their promises. When Tom lost his job 3 years ago, they couldn't afford their apartment anymore. It's just temporary, Hannah had promised. Until Tom finds something stable. I'd welcomed them with open arms. My house felt too empty after Raymond anyway. I thought having family around would fill the void he'd left, but gradually things changed. First, they'd taken over the master bedroom because it makes more sense for 3 people to have the larger room. Then my craft room became Ethan's playroom. My garden was replanted with vegetables I didn't choose. My opinions about dinner, TV shows, and household routines were dismissed. "Mom, that's not how we do things," Hannah would say, as if I were the guest in her home. I'd shrunk my presence, retreated to my small room, tried to be grateful for their company. All while continuing to pay the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, and most of the utilities. And now they wanted to send me away. I wiped away angry tears. How had I let this happen? How had I become so invisible in my own home that my daughter thought she could simply discard me? A photo on my nightstand caught my eye, Raymond holding newborn Hannah, his face glowing with pride. He would have been heartbroken to see what had become of our little family. "I've been too soft, Ray," I whispered to his image. I thought I was being kind, but I was teaching her the wrong lesson. My cell phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The screen showed my old friend Margaret's name. We'd been nurses together for 20 years, but had drifted apart after she moved to Arizona. "Lori, happy birthday, darling." Her warm voice filled my ear. "Margaret," I said, my voice cracking despite my efforts to sound normal. "It's so good to hear from you." "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. Margaret always could read me, even across a phone line. Before I could stop myself, everything poured out. The card, the gradual takeover of my home, the years of being taken for granted. "Oh, Lori," Margaret sighed when I finished. "You've always put everyone else first. But sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to stand your ground." As we talked, something stirred inside me. Not just anger or hurt, but a determination I hadn't felt in years. "What are you going to do?" Margaret asked. I looked at the documents spread across my bed, tangible proof of my claim to this house, to my place in the world. "I'm going to remember who I am," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "And I'm going to make sure they remember too." That evening, I picked up Ethan from soccer practice as promised. His 7-year-old energy filled my small car as he chattered about goals and teammates. I cherished these moments with him. He was the one bright spot in my increasingly uncomfortable home life. "Grandma, can we get ice cream?" he asked, his blue eyes so like Raymond's, pleading with me. "Sure, sweetie," I agreed, unable to resist his hopeful smile. At the ice cream parlor, Ethan happily devoured his chocolate cone while I barely tasted my vanilla scoop. My mind was too full of calculations and decisions. Grandma, are you sad? Ethan's question caught me off guard. I looked at him, surprised by his perceptiveness. Just thinking about grown-up stuff, I said, forcing a smile. He nodded solemnly. Dad says you might be going to live somewhere else soon. My spoon clattered against the dish. Your dad said that? When? Last night. He told Mom that you'd be happier in a place with other old people. The casual cruelty of it stung. They'd already been discussing my removal with Ethan, as if it were a foregone conclusion. Do you want to go away? Ethan's voice quavered slightly. I reached across the table and squeezed his small hand. No, sweetheart. I don't want to go anywhere. When we arrived home, Tom's sleek black car was in the driveway alongside Hannah's SUV. They were home early for once. Where have you two been? Hannah demanded as we walked through the door. Dinner's getting cold. We got ice cream, Ethan announced proudly. Hannah frowned. Mom, you know he's not supposed to have sugar before dinner. It's a special day, I replied, removing my jacket. It's not every day your grandma turns 57. Hannah had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. Right. Well, wash up, Ethan. We're eating now. Dinner was a tense affair. Tom dominated the conversation with talk about his latest business prospect. Some app he was developing that would revolutionize social media. Hannah nodded supportively, while I pushed food around my plate, Ethan's earlier revelation still echoing in my mind. Mom, did you get my note? Hannah asked suddenly as Tom cleared the plates. I met her eyes across the table. You mean the birthday card? She shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, that. I thought it might be good to start the conversation. About sending me away from my own home? My voice was calm, belying the storm inside. It's not sending you away, Hannah sighed, as if I were being dramatic. Sunset Gardens is a really nice retirement community. They have activities, medical staff on site. I'm 57, Hannah. Not 87. I don't need a retirement home. Tom rejoined us, placing a hand on Hannah's shoulder. Lori, we're just thinking about what's best for everyone. This house is getting crowded, and Ethan needs space to grow. And you need my bedroom? I asked pointedly. We could use it as a home office, Tom admitted. I'm working from home more now, and the kitchen table isn't ideal. So I should leave my home so you can have an office? Hannah's expression hardened. Mom, don't be difficult. We've thought this through. The money from selling the house would easily cover your stay at Sunset Gardens, with plenty left over. Selling the house? I repeated slowly. And who exactly would be selling it? Hannah and Tom exchanged glances. Well, we'd handle everything, Tom assured me. You wouldn't need to worry about any of the details. A strange calm settled over me. So this was their plan, not just to move me out, but to sell my house and use the proceeds as they saw fit. I'd like to see Ethan to bed, I said, standing up abruptly. I promised to read him a story. Later, after tucking Ethan in, I overheard Hannah and Tom talking in the living room. Pausing in the dim hallway, I listened. She's being stubborn, Tom was saying. We need to push forward with this. The market's hot right now, we could get top dollar for this place. I know, Hannah replied. But she seems so upset. Maybe we should give her more time. Time for what? To change her mind? Hannah, your mom's getting older. She needs a place with support. And frankly, we need the cash from this house. My business is about to take off, but I need capital. I know. It's her home. It's our home now, Tom insisted. Has been for years. Listen, I found some forms online about power of attorney. If she's being unreasonable, we might need to consider that route. My blood ran cold. Power of attorney? They wanted to take legal control over my decisions? I retreated silently to my room, my hands shaking with anger and betrayal. They weren't just planning to send me away, they were plotting to take everything from me. Opening my laptop, I began to research. First about my legal rights as the homeowner, then about retirement fund options. Finally, I found a local law firm specializing in elder rights. I made an appointment for the next day. They thought I was just a fading old woman they could push aside. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The law office of Martinez and Associates was located in a converted Victorian house downtown. Ms. Martinez herself, a sharp-eyed woman about my age with salt and pepper hair, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Wilson, please have a seat," she said, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from her desk. "You mentioned on the phone this is regarding property rights?" I placed my folder of documents on her desk. "My daughter and son-in-law want to send me to a retirement home and sell my house," I explained, my voice steadier than I expected. "The house that's in my name and that I'm still paying the mortgage on." As I recounted the details, how I'd welcomed Hanna and Tom into my home, how they'd gradually taken over, and finally, the birthday card and their plans to sell, Ms. Martinez's expression grew increasingly concerned. "This happens more often than you'd think," she said, examining my mortgage documents. "Family members assuming control over a senior's assets, sometimes with good intentions, sometimes not." "I'm not even a senior," I said with a bitter laugh. "I'm 57 and in perfect health." She nodded sympathetically. "From a legal standpoint, Mrs. Wilson, your position is quite strong. The house is solely in your name. They have no claim to it whatsoever. Even though they've been living there for 3 years? Even then, they have no ownership rights. In fact, technically they're tenants at will. You could evict them if you chose to." The word evict caught in my throat. Could I really throw my own daughter out? But then I remembered Tom's words about power of attorney, their plans to sell my home out from under me. "What should I do?" I asked. Ms. Martinez considered for a moment. "First, secure your documents. Keep the deed, mortgage statements, and other important papers somewhere safe, outside your home if possible. Second, monitor your credit and accounts closely. And third," she smiled slightly, "consider your endgame. What outcome do you want from this situation?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. What did I want? Not revenge exactly, but respect, recognition, my home and my dignity back. "I want my house to be mine again," I said finally. "I want my daughter to understand what she's doing. And I want to be treated like a person, not a problem to be solved." After leaving the law office, I drove to the bank and rented a safe deposit box for my most important documents. Then I called Margaret again. "You're doing the right thing, Lori," she assured me. "It's not selfish to protect yourself. But what if I damage my relationship with Hanna forever?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "Honey, she damaged it when she tried to push you out of your own home," Margaret said bluntly. "You're just responding to that." That evening, instead of going straight home, I drove to Lakeside Park, the place where Raymond had proposed to me 35 years ago. The late afternoon sun sparkled on the water as I sat on a bench, remembering the man who had loved me so completely. "I could use your advice, Ray," I whispered. "What would you do?" Of course there was no answer. But sitting there, watching the timeless rhythm of waves against shore, something inside me shifted. Raymond had always encouraged my independence, had believed in my strength even when I didn't. He wouldn't want me to be pushed aside, treated as less than I was. I thought about the life I'd put on hold after he died. The painting classes I'd abandoned to watch Ethan. The travel plans shelved to help with the mortgage. The book club I'd left because Thursday evenings became Hannah's time to go out with friends while I babysit. Bit by bit, I'd made myself smaller to accommodate others. It was time to reclaim my space, literally and figuratively. On the drive home, I passed a community center with a sign advertising, "Beginner's Watercolor, Tuesday evenings." On impulse, I pulled over and went inside to register. "Have you painted before?" the receptionist asked as she processed my payment. "Years ago," I replied, "but I'm ready to start again." By the time I arrived home, the house was quiet. A note on the counter informed me that Hanna, Tom, and Ethan had gone to dinner at Tom's parents' house. The reprieve from tension was welcome. I walked through the house again, this time with new purpose. In the living room, I moved Raymond's favorite reading lamp back beside the armchair where it had always been before Tom decided it, cluttered the space. In the kitchen, I retrieved my collection of hand-painted mugs from the back of a high cupboard where they'd been relegated. Small acts of reclamation, but they felt significant. Then I entered my bedroom and began to transform it. I hung a painting I'd created years ago, an ocean scene Raymond had particularly loved. I rearranged the furniture to create a small reading nook by the window. I even changed the drab beige curtains Hanna had selected for cheerful blue ones I found in the linen closet. As I worked, a plan began forming in my mind. I wouldn't confront Hanna and Tom directly, not yet. I would build my strength, gather my resources, and prepare for the conversation that was coming. And when that day arrived, I would speak not from a place of hurt and betrayal, but from a position of power and clarity. I was done being a guest in my own home. It was time they remembered who actually held the keys to this house, in every sense of the word. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved carefully, building my strategy piece by piece. I attended 2 watercolor classes, reconnected with old nursing colleagues for lunch, and met again with Ms. Martinez to finalize my legal position. I opened a new bank account at a different bank, ensuring Hanna had no access to it. I even called a real estate agent, not to sell my house, but to get an accurate assessment of its value. Meanwhile, the tension at home grew thicker. Hanna made pointed comments about lovely retirement communities she'd researched. Tom left brochures for Sunset Gardens on the kitchen counter. They spoke about the future as if my departure was a settled matter. I said little, letting them believe their plans were proceeding. But I watched, I listened, and I prepared. Then came the text that confirmed my suspicions. It wasn't meant for me. Hanna had sent it to Tom, but our tablets were linked through the same Apple ID, something they'd forgotten when setting up my device years ago. Realtor coming tomorrow at 3. Mom will be at her doctor's appointment. Don't mention it to her yet. They were already showing my house to realtors. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. The betrayal cut deep, but it also solidified my resolve. It was time to end this charade. That evening, I called Hanna while she was still at work. I'd like to have a family dinner tomorrow night, I said. Something special. Tomorrow. She sounded distracted. I don't know, Mom. We might have plans. Cancel them, I said firmly. This is important. My tone must have surprised her because she hesitated only briefly before agreeing. Fine. What's the occasion? Let's just say I've made some decisions about my future. She perked up at that. Oh, that's great, Mom. We can talk about Sunset Gardens and… Tomorrow at 7, I interrupted. I'll cook. The next day, I prepared Raymond's famous pot roast, the meal we'd always served on special occasions. I set the dining room table with my good china, the set Raymond and I had received as a wedding gift. I even bought flowers for a centerpiece. This would be a dinner they'd remember. At 7 sharp, we gathered around the table, Hanna, Tom, Ethan, and me. I'd asked Ethan to join us, despite Hanna's suggestion that he eat earlier and play in his room. He was part of this family too. He deserved to hear the truth. This looks amazing, Grandma, Ethan said, his eyes wide at the formal table setting. Thank you, sweetheart. I smiled at him, then served everyone before taking my seat. Tom watched me warily, clearly sensing something was different. Hanna seemed nervous but hopeful, probably thinking I was about to announce my agreement to move to Sunset Gardens. So, Mom, she began after a few minutes of small talk, you mentioned you've made some decisions? I took a sip of my water, noting how they both leaned forward expectantly. Yes, I have. First, though, I'd like to ask about your meeting with the realtor today. Was it productive? The color drained from Hanna's face. Tom choked slightly on his wine. How did you? Hanna stammered. Your text to Tom came through on my tablet, I explained calmly. You really should be more careful with technology. Tom recovered first. Lori, we were just exploring options. Getting information. For selling my house, I said, my voice steady. Without consulting me. Without my permission. It's not like that, Hanna protested weakly. Then what is it like? I asked, looking her directly in the eyes. Please explain to me how showing my home to realtors behind my back isn't exactly what it appears to be. Silence fell over the table. Ethan looked between the adults, confused by the sudden tension. We were going to tell you, Tom finally said, his tone placating. Once we had all the information. Information about selling a house that isn't yours to sell? I reached into the folder I'd placed beside my chair and pulled out the deed to the house. I set it on the table between us. This house is in my name. Only my name. Mom, Hanna's voice took on that patronizing tone I'd come to hate. We know that technically the house is in your name, but… Not technically, I corrected her. Legally. Actually. In every way that matters. I pulled out another document, my most recent mortgage statement. I also pay the mortgage. Every month. By myself. Tom's expression darkened. We contribute to the household. You buy groceries occasionally and paid for the new water heater last year. I acknowledged. That hardly equates to ownership. So what are you saying? Hanna demanded, her cheeks flushing with anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. I'm saying that I won't be going to Sunset Gardens or any other retirement community. This is my home, and I'm staying in it. But, Tom began. I held up my hand, stopping him. I'm not finished. Since you both seem so convinced that this house is too small for all of us, I agree that someone should move out. I paused, letting the words sink in. You have 60 days to find a new place to live. The shock on their faces would have been comical under different circumstances. You're evicting us? Hanna's voice rose to a near shout. Your own daughter? I'm reclaiming my home, I corrected her. The home that you tried to sell out from under me. This is ridiculous, Tom sputtered. You can't just. Actually, she can. A new voice interjected. All heads turned to the dining room entrance. Ms. Martinez stood there, elegant in her business suit, holding a leather portfolio. 1 year later, I stood in my garden, pruning the rose bushes Raymond had planted for our 10th anniversary. The morning sun warmed my shoulders as I worked, enjoying the simple pleasure of tending to something beautiful. The past year had brought changes I never could have anticipated that evening at the dinner table when everything finally came to a head. After Ms. Martinez had made her unexpected entrance, I'd arranged for her to arrive midway through our confrontation. She had calmly explained my legal rights to a stunned Hanna and Tom. They weren't just facing eviction. They were potentially liable for attempting to sell property they didn't own. This is a legally straightforward situation, Ms. Martinez had told them, her voice professional but firm. Mrs. Wilson owns this house. She has the right to decide who lives in it. Tom had been furious, threatening lawsuits and claiming they had verbal agreements about the house. Ms. Martinez had simply smiled and asked to see any documentation of such agreements. Of course there were none. Hanna had cycled through anger, tears, and finally, a shocked silence as the reality of the situation sank in. You'd really throw us out? She'd asked, her voice small. After everything we've done for you? The question had hit me like a physical blow. Everything you've done for me? I'd repeated. Hanna, I've spent my entire life giving to you, sacrificing for you. Even these past 3 years, I've continued paying for this roof over your heads while being treated like an unwelcome guest in my own home. But we're family, she protested. Yes, we are, I'd agreed. Which is why I expected to be treated with love and respect, not to be discarded the moment I became inconvenient. In the end, they hadn't needed the full 60 days. Tom's parents had a rental property that happened to be vacant, and within 3 weeks they were gone. The move had been tense with minimal conversation. Ethan had been confused and upset, not understanding why they were leaving Grandma's house. You can come visit me whenever you want, I'd promised him, kneeling to meet his tearful gaze. This will always be a place where you're welcome. After they left, the house had felt strangely empty. For the first few weeks I'd wandered the rooms, adjusting to the silence, relearning what it meant to be alone. I'd moved back into the master bedroom, reclaiming the space that had been mine and Raymond's, redecorating it with the blue tones he'd always loved. Gradually, I filled the emptiness with new routines, new purposes. I converted Ethan's old room into an art studio, the morning light perfect for painting. I joined a book club that met every Thursday evening. I even started volunteering at the hospital where I'd worked for 30 years, not as a nurse but reading to patients in the long-term care unit. And slowly, painfully, Hanna and I began to rebuild. The first month after they moved out, communication had been minimal. Terse texts about picking up forgotten items, formal arrangements for Ethan's visits. But when Hanna's birthday came around in March, I'd sent a card with a heartfelt note, not mentioning our conflict but expressing my love for her. She'd called, her voice hesitant. Thanks for the card, Mom. You're welcome, sweetheart. Happy birthday. A pause then. I miss your carrot cake. It had been a small opening but I'd taken it. I could make one. Bring it over this weekend, maybe? That first visit had been awkward, conversation stilted. But Ethan's joy at seeing me had broken some of the tension, and by the time I left, Hanna had given me a genuine hug. Progress came in small steps after that. Coffee once a month became a regular occurrence. We were careful at first, avoiding the subject of the house, sticking to safe topics like Ethan's school and my painting classes. Then one day, over our third cup, Hanna had looked at me directly. "I'm sorry, Mom," she'd said simply. "What we tried to do, what I allowed Tom to plan, it was wrong." The apology, though long overdue, had lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. "Thank you for saying that," I'd replied. "I'm sorry it came to such a breaking point. Tom and I are in counseling," she'd admitted. "Not just because of what happened with you, but it opened my eyes to some patterns in our relationship. He makes decisions without consulting me, dismisses my concerns. I'm learning to stand up for myself." I'd reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you for that." Our relationship would never be the same as before, but perhaps it was becoming something better, something built on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation. As for Tom, he remained distant, still angry about what he saw as my betrayal. That was fine. I didn't need his approval anymore. The sound of a car pulling into my driveway brought me back to the present. Setting down my pruning shears, I smiled as I recognized Margaret's rental car. After years of long-distance friendship, she'd finally made good on her promise to visit, arriving yesterday for a 2-week stay. "The garden looks wonderful," she called as she stepped out of the car, shopping bags in hand. "Those roses are magnificent. Raymond always said they'd outlive us both," I replied, pulling off my gardening gloves. "What did you buy?" "Supplies for our adventure," she grinned, holding up the bags. "Hiking boots, trail maps, and some disgustingly healthy snack bars. You're still on for Redwood National Park next week, right?" I nodded, excitement bubbling up inside me. The trip we'd been planning for months was finally happening. My first real vacation in over a decade. "Is Ethan excited about his weekend here while we're gone?" Margaret asked as we walked into the house. "Beyond excited. I've got the guest room all set up with dinosaur sheets and that volcano science kit you sent." Later that evening, as Margaret and I sat on the porch with glasses of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I felt a profound sense of peace. "You know," Margaret said, "a year ago when you called me about that birthday card, I never would have expected to see you so radiant." I considered her words. I don't think I would have either. I was so afraid of being alone, of losing my daughter. But standing up for myself didn't end my life. It gave me a new one. Margaret raised her glass. "To new beginnings. And to knowing your own worth." I clinked my glass against hers, thinking of all the changes the past year had brought. The house around me was still the same structure, still held the same memories of Raymond, of raising Hanna, of all the years that had shaped me. But now it was truly mine again, not just legally but spiritually. And so was I.